The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as Elena wiped down another table. It was just past 7 in the evening, and the grand ivory concert hall was beginning to fill with guests. Women in elegant gowns glided past her, their perfume leaving trails of expensive fragrance in the air. Men in tailored suits laughed and sipped champagne, completely unaware of the young woman in the white uniform clearing their plates. Elena had been working at the Grand Ivory for almost 3 years now. Every evening, she served the city's wealthiest residents as they attended classical music performances. She knew the routine by heart, smiled politely. Keep your eyes down. Refill the glasses before they're empty. Never interrupt conversations. Be invisible. And she was very good at being invisible. But what none of these people knew, what none of her co-workers even suspected, was that Elena understood the music playing in the background better than anyone in the room. Every note, every crescendo, every subtle dynamic shift spoke to her in a language she'd spent her entire childhood learning. 10 years ago, things had been different. Back then, Elena had been the rising star of the National Conservatory. Her teachers called her a prodigy. By the time she was 16, she'd won every youth piano competition in the region. Her picture had hung in the conservatory's Hall of Fame, right next to photographs of musicians who'd gone on to perform in the world's greatest concert halls. Her mother used to sit in the front row at every performance, tears streaming down her face as Elena's fingers danced across the keys. After each recital, her mother would hug her tight and whisper, "You're going to change the world with this gift, Mija." But the world had other plans. During Elena's final year at the conservatory, her mother started feeling tired all the time. At first, they thought it was just stress from working 2 jobs to support Elena's education. But then came the doctor's appointments, the tests, the diagnosis that changed everything. Cancer. The word hit their small family like a wrecking ball. Elena's father had left when she was just a baby, so it had always been just the 2 of them. Her mother was her entire world, and suddenly that world was crumbling. The medical bills started piling up immediately. Her mother's insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. There were experimental treatments to try, specialists to see, medications that cost more than their monthly rent. Elena watched her mother grow weaker each day, watched her try to hide the pain behind brave smiles. The choice Elena faced wasn't really a choice at all. She withdrew from the conservatory 3 months before graduation. Her scholarship, which had covered her full tuition, evaporated the moment she left. Her teachers begged her to reconsider, to find another way, but Elena knew there was no other option. Her mother needed her. For the next 2 years, Elena became a full-time caregiver. She took whatever jobs she could find that offered flexible hours. She worked at a grocery store, cleaned houses, and eventually landed the waitressing position at the Grand Ivory. The pay was decent, and the tips from wealthy patrons helped cover the mounting medical expenses. During those 2 years, Elena barely touched a piano. There was no time, no energy, no space in her heart for music when her mother was suffering. She spent her days at her mother's bedside helping her eat, giving her medications, holding her hand through the worst of it. Her mother fought hard, harder than anyone Elena had ever known. But in the end, the cancer won. The day her mother died, something inside Elena died too. The funeral was small, attended by a few neighbors and the nurses who'd cared for her mother during those final weeks. Elena stood beside the grave in a dress she'd borrowed, feeling completely hollow. That was 10 months ago. Now Elena went through her days on autopilot. Wake up at noon. Practice on her beat-up electronic keyboard for a few hours in her tiny studio apartment. Get ready for work. Take the bus to the Grand Ivory. Serve wealthy people who never looked at her face. Go home. Sleep. Repeat. The hardest part of working at the Grand Ivory wasn't the long hours or the demanding customers. It was the piano. Right there in the main lobby, just past the coat check, sat the most beautiful instrument Elena had ever seen. A Steinway & Sons concert grand piano, its black surface polished to such a shine that you could see your reflection in it. The venue kept it there as decoration, a symbol of the refined culture that took place within these walls. Elena had to walk past that piano at least 20 times every shift. Each time her fingers itched. Her heart ached. It was like being a starving person forced to walk past a feast they weren't allowed to touch. Sometimes, Late at night, when she was closing up and the hall was empty, Elena would stand beside the piano and just look at it. She'd trace her fingers along its edge, not quite touching the keys, imagining what it would feel like to play such an instrument. Her cheap electronic keyboard at home was functional, but it was nothing compared to this. One night, about 6 months into her job, Elena had given in to temptation. It was nearly midnight, and she'd been certain she was alone in the building. She'd lifted the lid, sat down on the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. The moment she'd played the first chord, she'd started crying. The sound was so pure, so perfect, so achingly beautiful that it broke something open inside her chest. She'd played for maybe 2 minutes before fear overtook her, and she'd stopped, terrified that someone would hear and she'd lose her job. She hadn't touched it again since then, but the longing never went away. Tonight was going to be particularly difficult. The Grand Ivory was hosting the finals of the International Piano Competition, one of the most prestigious events in the classical music world. Pianists from across the globe had competed for months to reach this point. The winner would receive a cash prize, a recording contract, and guaranteed performances at major concert halls worldwide. As Elena refilled water glasses and delivered appetizers, she couldn't help but listen to the conversations around her. The guests were discussing the performers, debating who would win, throwing around technical terms that most of them probably didn't fully understand. "I heard Viktor Petrov is performing tonight," one woman said to her companion. "He's supposed to be extraordinary." "Oh yes," the man replied. "I saw him perform in Vienna last year. Absolutely brilliant technique." Elena bit her tongue. She'd heard recordings of Viktor Petrov. He was technically proficient, sure, but his playing lacked soul. It was the kind of performance that impressed other musicians, but didn't move audiences to tears. But of course she couldn't say any of that. She was just the waitress. During her break, Elena stood in the back hallway and listened to the sounds drifting from the concert hall. Someone was warming up on stage, running through scales and arpeggios. The sound made her close her eyes, her fingers unconsciously mimicking the movements in the air. "You like classical music?" Elena's eyes snapped open. Miguel, one of the other servers, was standing beside her, a knowing smile on his face. "Yeah," she said simply. "I do. Most people our age think it's boring," Miguel said. "But there's something about it, you know? The way it can make you feel things without any words." Elena nodded. Miguel had no idea how deeply she understood what he meant. "Come on," he said. "Break's over. The show's about to start, and they're going to need us running drinks all night." As Elena headed back to the floor, she had no idea that in just a few hours, everything in her life was about to change, that the years of sacrifice and loss, of buried dreams and silent longing, were all leading to this one extraordinary night. Sometimes fate works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the universe takes everything away from you, breaks you down completely just so it can build you back up into something stronger. Tonight, Elena was about to discover that some dreams don't die. They just wait for the right moment to come back to life. The concert hall buzzed with excitement. Elena moved between tables, her tray balanced perfectly as she navigated through clusters of guests. Everyone was dressed to impress tonight. This wasn't just any performance. The International Piano Competition finals drew the kind of crowd that flew in from other countries just to attend. Elena recognized some faces from previous events. There was Mr. Chen, a tech entrepreneur who donated heavily to the arts. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, an oil heiress who served on the board of 3 different symphonies. And there, near the front, sat the competition judges themselves. 5 of the most respected pianists and music critics in the world. "Excuse me, miss." A man in an expensive suit snapped his fingers at Elena. "We've been waiting for our drinks for 10 minutes. Elena checked her watch mentally. It had been 4 minutes, but she smiled anyway. "I apologize, sir. I'll check on those right away." In the kitchen, chaos reigned. The catering staff was overwhelmed. Tonight's event had twice the usual number of guests, and everyone wanted everything at once. Elena loaded up her tray with champagne flutes and headed back out. As she pushed through the doors, she nearly collided with someone rushing in the opposite direction. It was David, the venue's event coordinator, and his face was pale with panic. "Watch it," he snapped, not even looking at her as he hurried past. Elena steadied her tray and continued on. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air. Staff members were whispering urgently to each other. David was now on his phone, pacing back and forth near the lobby, his free hand gesturing wildly. After delivering the champagne, Elena caught Miguel's arm. "What's going on? You didn't hear?" Miguel's eyes were wide. "Victor Petrov is sick. Like really sick. They found him in the bathroom backstage about 20 minutes ago. Threw up everywhere." Elena's heart skipped. "Is he okay?" "They called an ambulance just to be safe, but apparently he ate something that didn't agree with him. Food poisoning, they think." Miguel shook his head. "But here's the real problem. He was supposed to be the main performance tonight. The big finale. And now they have no one." Elena watched as David continued his frantic phone calls. He was clearly trying to find a replacement, but the odds weren't good. Every professional pianist in the city was either already at the venue as a competitor or judge, or they were unreachable on such short notice. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the sound system. "We apologize for the delay. We're experiencing a minor technical difficulty. The performance will begin shortly. Please enjoy the refreshments." Technical difficulty. That was one way to put it. Elena continued working, but she couldn't stop thinking about the situation. She knew what pieces were supposed to be performed tonight. Victor Petrov was scheduled to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beautiful and technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire. You couldn't just grab any pianist off the street to perform it. It required not just skill, but deep emotional understanding. Elena had played that piece herself years ago. It had been her signature performance, the one that had won her the top prize at the National Youth Competition when she was 17. She knew every note, every nuance, every emotion Rachmaninoff had poured into those pages. As she refilled water glasses, Elena found herself unconsciously humming the opening chords. Her fingers twitched at her sides, remembering the feel of the keys under them. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" A woman in a blue gown was looking at her with concern. Elena realized she'd been standing frozen beside the woman's table, lost in thought. "Yes, I'm so sorry. Can I get you anything?" The woman shook her head but continued to watch Elena with curious eyes. Time was ticking. Elena could see David getting more desperate with each failed phone call. She overheard snippets of his conversations as she worked nearby. "I don't care if he's at dinner. This is an emergency. No, I already tried her. He's in Paris? Damn it." The judges were starting to look impatient. Guests were checking their watches. The carefully planned schedule was falling apart. Elena's heart was pounding. A wild, impossible idea was forming in her mind. It was crazy. Absolutely insane. She'd lose her job. They'd laugh at her. Who did she think she was? But then she remembered her mother's words. "You're going to change the world with this gift." And she remembered something else. Something her teacher at the conservatory used to say. Fear is just excitement without the breath. When you're afraid, you're actually standing at the edge of something important. Elena set down her tray. Her hands were shaking. Every logical part of her brain was screaming at her to stay quiet, to stay invisible, to keep her head down like she'd been doing for 3 years. But there was another voice too. A quieter voice. The voice of the girl who used to dream in music, who used to believe she could touch people's hearts through the piano. Before she could talk herself out of it, Elena walked toward David. He was ending another unsuccessful call, looking like he might actually cry. "Excuse me," Elena said quietly. David barely glanced at her. "Not now. I'm dealing with a crisis. I know. I can help." That got his attention. He looked at her properly for the first time, taking in her waitress uniform, her ponytail, her complete lack of anything that would suggest she belonged anywhere near a concert stage. "Unless you can conjure up a world-class pianist in the next 15 minutes. I don't think so," he said, turning away. "I can play it." David stopped, turned back slowly. "What did you say?" Elena's mouth was dry, but she forced the words out. "The Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2, I can play it." For a moment, David just stared at her. Then he laughed. Not a mean laugh, but a laugh of pure disbelief and stress. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't a karaoke night. This is the International Piano Competition. We need a professional. I am a professional. Or I was." Elena's voice grew stronger. "I studied at the National Conservatory. I won the National Youth Competition with that exact piece." David's laugh faded. He was studying her face now, trying to decide if she was serious or delusional. If that's true, why are you working as a waitress? Because life happens, Elena said simply. But I can still play. I practice every day. I know this piece backward and forward. Another event organizer rushed up to David. Any luck? The judges are starting to leave. David held up a hand, still looking at Elena. What's your name? Elena Torres. He pulled out his phone and started typing. Elena Torres, National Conservatory. Elena waited, her heart hammering. This was it. Either he'd find proof of what she was saying, or he'd call security to escort the crazy waitress out. Holy. David's eyes widened as he looked at his phone screen. You're listed here as a former student. Award winner. There's even a photo of you from 9 years ago. 10, Elena corrected. I left before graduating. David looked at her, then at his phone, then back at her. She could see him calculating, weighing the risk. Putting an unknown waitress on stage could be a disaster, but the alternative was canceling the main performance of the evening, refunding thousands of dollars in tickets, and humiliating the venue in front of the most important people in the classical music world. Can you really play it? He asked. And I mean really. Not just the notes, but make it sound good. Elena met his eyes. Yes, another organizer approached. David, we need to make a decision. Now. David closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made a choice that would change everything. Get the conductor. Tell him we have a replacement performer. The organizer looked at Elena in her uniform and blinked. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Go, now. As the organizer hurried away, David turned to Elena. You have 15 minutes. If you can't do this, if you mess this up, we're both finished. Understand? Elena nodded. She understood perfectly. She also understood that this was the opportunity she'd been unconsciously waiting for since the day she'd walked away from the conservatory. Wait, David said as she started to walk away. You can't perform in that uniform. Elena looked down at her white shirt and black pants. He was right. She looked like exactly what she was. The help. We don't have time to find anything else, she said. David ran a hand through his hair. Then you perform in the uniform. At least it's clean. He shook his head. This is insane. He wasn't wrong. It was completely insane. But sometimes the most insane moments turn into the most beautiful ones. As Elena headed backstage, her legs felt like they might give out. Reality was setting in. In just a few minutes, she was going to walk onto a stage in front of hundreds of people. People who'd paid enormous amounts of money to see world-class performers. People who would judge every single note she played, and she was going to do it in a waitress uniform. The conductor met her backstage. He was a stern-looking man in his 60s who clearly wasn't happy about the situation. You know this piece? He asked bluntly. Yes, maestro. Key changes, tempo variations, all of it? All of it. He studied her for a long moment. Then let's not waste time. We'll do a quick run-through of the opening, just so the orchestra knows you're not going to fall apart. The next 10 minutes were a blur. Elena sat at the backstage piano and played through the opening section. Her fingers remembered everything. It was like greeting an old friend after years apart. The conductor's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something that might have been respect. You'll do, he said simply. Then, as he walked away, he added over his shoulder, Good luck. You're going to need it. Elena sat alone backstage, listening to the murmur of the crowd on the other side of the curtain. This was really happening. After 3 years of serving these people, of being invisible, she was about to step into the spotlight in the most dramatic way possible. Her phone buzzed. A text from Miguel. Did I just hear you're performing? Girl, what is happening? Elena didn't reply. She couldn't explain it even to herself. All she knew was that when she walked onto that stage, everything would change. Elena stood in the wings, her whole body trembling. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the concert hall filled with people. Every seat was taken. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the audience, making their jewelry sparkle and their expectant faces shine. These were the same people she'd been serving drinks to an hour ago. They had no idea what was about to happen. David appeared beside her, looking nearly as nervous as she felt. Okay, so here's what we're doing. I'm going to go out and make an announcement. I'll explain that Victor is ill and we have a replacement performer. I won't mention the whole waitress thing. Just try to look professional when you walk out. Elena looked down at her uniform. Professional wasn't exactly the word that came to mind. Hey, David's voice softened. You can still back out. No one would blame you. For a split second, Elena considered it. She could walk away right now. Go back to being invisible, keep her head down and her heart protected. It would be so much easier. But then what? Work at the Grand Ivory for another 3 years? Another 10 years? Spend the rest of her life walking past that piano in the lobby, wondering what might have been. I'm doing this, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. David nodded. All right then. Break a leg. He walked onto the stage and Elena heard his voice boom through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. Viktor Petrov has taken ill this evening and will be unable to perform. A wave of disappointed murmurs swept through the audience. However, David continued, we are fortunate to have secured a replacement performer who will play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 as scheduled. Please welcome to the stage Elena Torres. The applause was polite but confused. Nobody had heard of Elena Torres. She wasn't listed in the program, and when she stepped onto the stage in her black pants and white Waitress shirt, the confusion turned to shock. Elena heard it immediately, the gasps, the whispers that turned into a low buzz of conversation. She kept her eyes on the piano, trying to block it all out. But she couldn't miss the looks on people's faces. Near the back, she saw Mrs. Blackwood lean over to her companion and say something that made him laugh. She didn't need to hear the words to know they were mocking her. In the front row, one of the judges, a severe-looking woman with silver hair, raised her eyebrows and crossed her arms. The expression on her face was clear. This was going to be a disaster. Elena's legs felt like they might give out as she walked across the stage. It was the longest walk of her life. Every step felt wrong. She didn't belong here. What had she been thinking? As she passed the conductor, he gave her a subtle nod. It wasn't much, but it was something. Elena reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment, her hand resting on its polished surface. This was it, the point of no return. She could hear people still whispering. Someone in the third row was openly laughing. She sat down on the bench and immediately knew something was wrong. The height wasn't right. She needed to adjust it, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely turn the knob. The audience watched her struggle and the whispers grew louder. Finally, she got the bench adjusted. Elena placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. The whispers faded into background noise. The judgmental stare stopped mattering. For just a moment, she let herself remember why she'd fallen in love with music in the first place. She was 7 years old. In her first piano lesson, her teacher had played a simple melody, and Elena had felt something shift inside her chest. It was like discovering a secret language that spoke directly to her soul. She was 12, practicing until her fingers ached. Not because anyone made her, but because she couldn't imagine doing anything else. She was 17, performing at the national competition, watching her mother's face in the audience, seeing the pride and love shining in her eyes. She was 23, sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, humming lullabies because the morphine made her mother too confused to speak. But music still reached her somehow. Elena opened her eyes. Her hands had stopped shaking. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra lifted their instruments. And in that moment before the music began, Elena made a decision. She wasn't going to play for these people who were judging her. She wasn't going to play for the critics or the competition judges or anyone expecting her to fail. She was going to play for her mother. The conductor's baton fell, and the opening chords rang out from the orchestra. Elena's moment was coming. 3 measures. 2 measures. 1. Her fingers hit the keys, and the first notes of the piano part filled the hall. Everything else disappeared. People always talk about being in the zone or in flow, but until you experience it, you can't really understand what it means. For Elena, it felt like the piano was an extension of her own body. She wasn't thinking about the notes any more than she thought about breathing. It was just happening, natural as a heartbeat, but something else was happening too, something she hadn't expected. As she played, Elena felt emotions rising up from deep inside her. All the grief she'd been holding back, all the loss and pain and regret from the past 3 years, the anger at a universe that had taken her mother too soon, the guilt of having dreams when her mother was gone, the loneliness of hiding who she really was. It all came pouring out through her fingers. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but she didn't stop playing. If anything, she played harder with more intensity. She wasn't just performing Rachmaninoff's notes. She was channeling every ounce of human emotion she'd experienced into this music. In the audience, the laughter had stopped. Mrs. Blackwood, who'd been mocking Elena just moments before, sat forward in her seat, her expression completely transformed. Her companion, who'd been checking his phone, put it away and stared at the stage. The silver-haired judge in the front row uncrossed her arms. Her stern expression began to crack. By the time Elena reached the second movement, the famously emotional and tender part of the concerto, you could have heard a pin drop in the hall. Every person was completely transfixed. This movement is built on a melody so beautiful it almost hurts to hear. It speaks of love and loss in a way that words never could. As Elena played it, she thought about all the moments with her mother she'd never get back, the conversations they'd never have, the way her mother would never see her perform on a real stage like this. But her mother was here somehow. Elena could feel it. Every note she played was a love letter to the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her this gift. The tears kept coming, streaming down Elena's face and dripping onto the keys, but her playing never faltered. If anything, the tears seemed to make the music more powerful, raw, honest, real, and the audience felt it. In the fifth row, a businessman who'd come to the concert mainly because his wife dragged him, found himself wiping his eyes. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. The silver-haired judge's stern facade finally broke completely. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she watched this young woman in a waitress uniform pour her heart out through the piano. Near the back, Miguel stood with the other staff members who'd sneaked in to watch. He had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. He'd worked with Elena for 2 years and never known she could do this. Even the other musicians in the orchestra were affected. The cellist's eyes glistened with tears. The conductor, who'd seen hundreds of performances in his career, had to blink rapidly to keep his vision clear. As Elena moved into the third movement, the tempo picked up. This section is triumphant, powerful, full of life and energy. It's about overcoming darkness and finding hope again. Elena played it like someone who'd been through hell and finally found her way back. Her fingers flew across the keys with breathtaking speed and precision, but it wasn't just technical prowess anymore. It was pure emotion transformed into sound. The orchestra swelled behind her, matching her intensity. The conductor had abandoned his usual rigid style and was conducting with his whole body, swept up in the moment. And then, too soon and yet right on time, it was over. Elena played the final triumphant chords. The orchestra held the last note, and then there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. Elena lifted her hands from the keys and sat there, her chest heaving, tears still streaming down her face, completely overwhelmed by what had just happened. She'd given everything she had. There was nothing left. The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. And then, like a dam breaking, the audience exploded. Every single person in the hall leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening, mixed with shouts of "Bravo!" in multiple languages. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, crying, some of them openly sobbing. The silver-haired judge was on her feet, applauding so hard her hands must have hurt, tears running down her face. She turned to her fellow judges, said something, and they all nodded in agreement. Mrs. Blackwood was standing too, her face transformed with emotion. All her earlier mockery completely gone. Elena couldn't process it. She sat at the piano, staring out at the standing crowd, unable to believe what was happening. The conductor came over and gently helped her to her feet. He was crying too. "Take your bow," he whispered. "You earned this." Elena bowed, and the applause somehow got even louder. People were stamping their feet, whistling, shouting her name even though most of them had only learned it 10 minutes ago. The ovation went on and on. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. People didn't want to stop. They wanted to hold on to this moment, this incredible thing they'd just witnessed. Because what they'd seen wasn't just a great performance. They'd watched someone bare their soul in front of strangers. They'd witnessed transformation. They'd seen proof that dreams don't die, that talent doesn't fade, that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most unexpected places. As Elena finally left the stage, her legs barely holding her up, she had no idea that her life had just changed forever. But she could feel it. Something had shifted. Some door had opened that could never be closed again, and for the first time in 3 years, Elena Torres felt alive. Elena barely made it off the stage before her legs gave out. The conductor caught her arm, steadying her as the applause continued to thunder behind them. She couldn't stop shaking. Her whole body was trembling with the release of years of bottled-up emotion. "That was extraordinary," the conductor said, his voice thick with feeling. "In 40 years of conducting, I've never experienced anything like that." Elena tried to respond, but no words came out. She was crying too hard, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. David rushed over, his face a mixture of shock and exhilaration. "Elena, I don't even know what to say." You were." He shook his head, laughing in disbelief. "The judges want to see you immediately." "The judges?" Elena's heart jumped. "Am I in trouble?" "Trouble?" David laughed again. "No, definitely not trouble." Before Elena could process what was happening, she was being led to a private room near the stage. Her waitress uniform felt absurd now, the white shirt damp with sweat and tears. She must look like a complete mess. The door opened, and all 5 competition judges were there, standing as she entered. The silver-haired woman who'd been crying approached first. Up close, Elena could see she was in her 60s, elegant and composed despite her red-rimmed eyes. "My dear," the woman said in a Russian accent, "I need to know. What is your name again?" Elena Torres. Elena Torres." The woman repeated it slowly, as if committing it to memory. "I am Svetlana Volkova. I have been a concert pianist for 43 years. I have played in every major concert hall in the world. I have taught at the Moscow Conservatory, and in all that time I have never heard anyone play with such raw emotion and technical brilliance simultaneously." Elena felt her knees go weak again. Svetlana Volkova was a legend. Everyone in the classical music world knew her name. Another judge stepped forward, a man with kind eyes and gray hair. "Where have you been? Why don't we know your name?" So Elena told them. She told them about her mother's cancer, about leaving the conservatory, about the past 3 years of working as a waitress. She told them about practicing on her cheap keyboard, about walking past the beautiful piano in the lobby every day. She told them everything. By the time she finished, every judge in the room had tears in their eyes again. Svetlana grabbed Elena's hands. "Your mother. She would be so proud. You know this, yes?" Elena nodded, unable to speak. "What you did tonight," Svetlana continued. "This is what music is supposed to be. Not just notes on a page. Not just technical perfection, but real human emotion. Truth. You reminded all of us why we fell in love with music in the first place." One of the other judges, a woman from France, spoke up. "Elena, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to discuss your future. A talent like yours cannot remain hidden." "I don't understand," Elena said. "I'm not part of the competition. I just filled in because Victor was sick." "Forget the competition," another judge said. "What you have is beyond competition. You have a gift that needs to be shared with the world." The next hour passed in a blur. The judges asked Elena to play for them again, something smaller in the privacy of the room. Still shaking, she played a Chopin nocturne. They sat in complete silence, mesmerized. Meanwhile, something else was happening, something Elena had no idea about yet. During her performance, at least 20 people in the audience had recorded the concert on their phones. Within minutes of the performance ending, those videos started appearing online, and they spread like wildfire. The first video was posted on social media with the caption, "Waitress steps in for sick pianist at major competition. What happens next will give you chills." Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. By the time Elena was finishing her meeting with the judges, the video had 500,000 views. The story had everything people loved: an underdog, a shocking reveal, raw emotion, and the fact that Elena had performed in her waitress uniform made it even more powerful. You could see the journey on her face, the fear at the beginning, the transformation as she lost herself in the music, the tears streaming down her face as she played. People weren't just watching the video. They were sharing it with captions like, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," and "I'm crying in the middle of a coffee shop," and "Faith in humanity restored." The classical music world, usually reserved and slow to embrace viral moments, was going crazy. Famous musicians were sharing the video, calling it a once-in-a-generation performance. Music critics were writing rushed articles with headlines like, "Unknown Waitress Delivers Performance of the Year," and "The Piano Performance That Made Everyone Cry." Back in the private room, Svetlana was making phone calls. She spoke rapidly in Russian, then English, then Russian again. Finally, she hung up and turned to Elena. "I have called my colleagues at the Moscow Conservatory, at Juilliard, and at the Royal Academy in London. They all want to offer you scholarships, full scholarships. You can study anywhere you want." Elena felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "But I don't have money," she said weakly. "Even with a scholarship, I need to work. I have rent built." "About that," a new voice spoke from the doorway. Elena turned to see a man in an expensive suit entering the room. "I'm Richard Chen. You served me champagne earlier tonight." Elena recognized him. The tech entrepreneur, one of the richest men in the city. "I'm sorry, sir," Elena said automatically. "If your service was poor, I apologize." Richard smiled. "My service was fine. But your performance was transcendent. I want to help you." He pulled out his phone and showed her something. "Do you see this? Your performance is everywhere. Millions of people have watched it already. The world wants to hear more from you." "I don't understand," Elena said. "Let me be clear." Richard put his phone away. "I want to establish a foundation in your mother's name. It will provide financial support for talented musicians who've had to abandon their education due to hardship. And you will be the first recipient." Elena stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because your mother gave the world a gift when she raised you. Because talent shouldn't be wasted due to circumstance. And because—" Richard paused, his voice catching slightly. "Because I lost my own mother last year, and watching you play tonight, I felt like I understood grief in a way I hadn't before. Your music helped me. It helped everyone in that hall. That's worth supporting." The French judge spoke up. "Elena, I represent the Paris Philharmonic. We want to book you for a performance next season. If you're interested." "And I," said another judge, "am on the board of the London Symphony Orchestra. We'd love to have you as well." Elena looked around the room at all these important, powerful people offering her opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. It was too much. Way too much. "I need air," she gasped. David led her out to a balcony. The cool night air hit her face and she took deep, gulping breaths. Below, she could hear the crowd still lingering, still talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed. "Is this real?" Elena asked. "Am I dreaming?" "It's real," David said. "Elena, do you have any idea what you just did? You didn't just play a piano. You moved hundreds of people in that hall. And now with those videos going viral, you're moving millions of people around the world." Elena pulled out her phone for the first time since the performance. It was exploding with notifications. Text messages from old friends at the conservatory who'd seen the videos. Emails from concert halls. Social media mentions from people she'd never met. One message was from her old piano teacher, Professor Williams. "Elena, I knew you had it in you. I never stopped believing. Please call me." Another was from Miguel. "Girl, you're famous. There are news cameras downstairs asking about you." "News cameras?" "They're going to want interviews," David said gently. "Lots of them. Your life is about to change dramatically. Are you ready for that?" Elena looked up at the stars. She thought about her mother, about all the sacrifices she'd made. She thought about the past 3 years of invisible work, of buried dreams, of going through the motions of life without really living. "My mother used to tell me that my music was a gift," Elena said quietly. "Not just for me, but for everyone who heard it. I didn't understand what she meant. I thought music was about personal achievement, about winning competitions and making it to the top. And now?" David asked. "Now I understand. Tonight, when I was playing, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just trying to express what I felt. And somehow that connected with people." Elena wiped her eyes. "My mother was right. It is a gift, and I've been keeping it wrapped up for 3 years. So what are you going to do?" Elena thought about all the offers she'd just received. The scholarships, the performance opportunities, the foundation in her mother's name. It was overwhelming, but it was also right. This was the path she was supposed to be on. "I'm going to play," she said simply. "I'm going to practice and study and work harder than I ever have before. And I'm going to perform for anyone who wants to listen, because that's what my mother would want. That's what this gift is for." David smiled. "Then I guess you should go back inside." There are a lot of people waiting to talk to you. As they turned to go back in, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the glass door. She was still wearing her waitress uniform. Her makeup was streaked with tears. Her hair was messy. She looked like someone who'd just been through something transformative. And she had been. When they re-entered the building, a small crowd had gathered. Staff members, musicians, people from the audience who'd stayed late hoping to meet her. They all started clapping when they saw her. Miguel pushed through the crowd and hugged her tight. "I can't believe you've been hiding this from us." "I wasn't hiding it," Elena said. I didn't think anyone wanted to hear it anymore." "Are you kidding?" Miguel laughed. "The whole world wants to hear it. You're everywhere online. Like, everywhere." Svetlana appeared again, looking purposeful. "Elena, there's a press conference starting in 20 minutes. We need to prepare you for questions, and you should probably change clothes." Elena looked down at her uniform one more time. In a way, she was sad to take it off. This uniform represented a difficult chapter of her life, but it was also what she'd been wearing when everything changed, when she'd found the courage to step back into her dreams. "Actually," Elena said, "I think I'll keep it on for the press conference. This is who I am. Someone who works hard. Someone who doesn't give up. I'm not ashamed of being a waitress." Svetlana smiled approvingly. "Then you will give the press conference in your uniform, and you will show the world that greatness comes from unexpected places." As Elena followed everyone toward the press room, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Pure, bright, unstoppable hope. Her mother had always believed this moment would come. Elena had just needed to be brave enough to reach for it. And now, finally, she was ready. The press conference was chaos. 20 journalists crammed into a room meant for 10, cameras flashing, questions being shouted over each other. Elena sat at a long table with Svetlana on one side and David on the other, still wearing her waitress uniform, trying to process that any of this was actually happening. "Elena, how long have you been playing piano? Did you know your performance would go viral? What's it like going from serving drinks to performing on stage? Can you tell us about your mother?" That last question made Elena pause. A reporter in the front row, a young woman with kind eyes, had asked it gently, not aggressively like some of the others. "My mother," Elena began, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger. "She's the reason I'm here. She worked 2 jobs to pay for my music lessons when I was young. When I got into the conservatory, she was so proud. And when I had to leave to take care of her, she cried. Not because she was sick, but because she felt like she'd stolen my dreams." The room had gone quiet. Every reporter was listening now, really listening. "But she didn't steal them," Elena continued. "She just held on to them for me until I was ready to take them back. Tonight, when I played for her. Every note was a thank you for everything she sacrificed, everything she gave me." Several reporters were wiping their eyes. The young woman who'd asked the question nodded, understanding. "What's next for you?" another reporter asked. "Will you continue working as a waitress?" Elena laughed, surprised by the question. "Honestly, I don't know. 24 hours ago, I thought I'd be working at the Grand Ivory for the foreseeable future. Now I've been offered scholarships and performance opportunities I never imagined. It's a lot to take in." "If you could say one thing to young musicians who've given up on their dreams," a reporter from a music magazine asked, "what would it be?" Elena thought about that for a moment. "I'd tell them that dreams don't have expiration dates. I'm 28 years old. For the past 3 years, I thought my chance had passed. I thought I was too old, too far behind, too forgotten. But tonight proved that wrong. If you have talent, if you have passion, if you're willing to work hard, it's never too late to try again." The press conference went on for another 30 minutes. Elena answered questions about her training, about the technical aspects of the performance, about what pieces she wanted to play next. She was exhausted by the end of it, but also energized in a way she hadn't felt in years. After the reporters finally left, Svetlana turned to Elena. "You handled that beautifully, natural and honest. The media will love you for it." "I just told the truth," Elena said. Exactly. That is your strength. You are genuine. In a world of manufactured personalities, that is refreshing. Over the next few days, Elena's life became unrecognizable. The video of her performance hit 10 million views, then 20 million, then 50 million. It was being shared across every social media platform, featured on news programs, discussed on morning talk shows. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the impact. People were sending her messages from all over the world, telling her how her performance had affected them. A man from Japan wrote, "I gave up on my music 20 years ago to take over my family's business. Watching you play reminded me why I loved it in the first place. I'm taking lessons again." A woman from Brazil. "I was having the worst day of my life when I saw your video. I sat in my car and cried listening to you play. You reminded me that beauty still exists in the world." A teenager from Canada. "My mom died last year and I didn't think I'd ever feel happy again, but your performance made me feel connected to her somehow. Thank you." Hundreds of messages like these poured in. Elena spent hours reading them, overwhelmed by the realization that her music was touching people she'd never meet, in places she'd never been. Richard Chen was true to his word. Within a week, he'd established the foundation in Elena's mother's name. The initial funding would support 10 musicians in their first year, covering tuition, living expenses, and instruments. Elena would be the first recipient, but more importantly, she'd help select the others. "I want to find people like me," Elena told Richard during their first meeting about the foundation. "People with real talent who got knocked off course by life. People who just need a second chance." "That's exactly what your mother would want," Richard agreed. The scholarship offers kept coming. Juilliard, the Paris Conservatory, the Royal Academy in London. Schools Elena had only dreamed about attending. After careful consideration and long conversations with Svetlana, she chose to return to her original school, the National Conservatory, the place where her journey had begun. "I need to finish what I started," Elena explained to Professor Williams when she called him. "I left 3 years ago without graduating. I need to complete that chapter properly before starting new ones." Professor Williams was overjoyed. "Elena, I've been saving your old practice room for you. I always hoped you'd come back." The conservatory made a special exception, allowing Elena to complete her degree while also taking on some performance opportunities. It wouldn't be easy juggling her studies with concerts and interviews and all the attention, but Elena was used to hard work. Her first official concert was scheduled for 3 months away, Carnegie Hall in New York. When Elena heard the venue, she nearly fainted. "Carnegie Hall?" she'd gasped. That's where legends perform." "And now you will too," Svetlana said simply. "The tickets sold out in 4 hours. People are flying in from around the world to hear you." The pressure was immense, but Elena threw herself into preparation. She practiced 6 hours a day, working with Professor Williams to refine her technique, working with Svetlana to develop her interpretation and emotional depth. She was determined to prove that her viral performance wasn't a fluke, that she deserved this chance. But she also made sure to take care of other important things. She worked with Richard to interview applicants for the foundation. Meeting other musicians who'd faced hardships similar to hers was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She knew her mother would love that something positive was coming from their struggles. Elena also insisted on staying in touch with her friends from the Grand Ivory. Miguel came to visit her at the conservatory one day, looking around at the practice rooms and recital halls with wonder. "This is your world," he said. "It's so different from the restaurant." "Both worlds matter," Elena told him. "Working at the Grand Ivory taught me humility and empathy. It taught me what it means to serve others. I'll never forget that." As the weeks passed and her Carnegie Hall performance approached, Elena felt ready, not because she'd mastered every possible technical challenge, but because she understood now what made a performance truly special. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. It was about opening your heart and letting people see your truth. The night before she flew to New York, Elena visited her mother's grave for the first time since the funeral. She'd been avoiding it, unable to face the finality of that stone marker with her mother's name carved into it. But now she felt strong enough. She sat on the grass beside the grave and talked to her mother like she used to, telling her about everything that had happened. "I did it, Mom," Elena whispered. "I'm going to Carnegie Hall. Can you believe it? Your daughter, who you raised in that tiny apartment, who you worked so hard for, is going to play on one of the most famous stages in the world." The evening breeze rustled through the trees, and Elena let herself believe that was her mother's way of responding. "I know you'd tell me not to be nervous," Elena continued. "You'd tell me to just play from my heart, like I always did. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you proud." She stayed there until the sun set, feeling more at peace than she had in years. The Carnegie Hall performance was everything Elena hoped it would be, and more. She played Rachmaninoff again, the piece that had changed her life, but this time she also performed Chopin.